Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Simeon Morrow Public Speaking and Presentations, Vienna Live with Simeon Morrow, and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please turn off your microphone and or video camera and or go to the LinkedIn live video feed, the link to which I'll now place in the chat room. For a better experience, please turn off your microphone and set your video to gallery view. This show thrives on participant contributions, and all participants are encouraged to actively participate in this webinar by asking questions and making comments. To do so, please either write in the chat room, raise your hand, or turn on your microphone and say hi, and I'll be delighted to include your perspective in the conversation. Tonight, our featured guest is Dr. Rossitza Jekova-Goza, a violinist, first violinist of the Harrington String Quartet, Harrington Lecturer in Violin at West Texas A&M University, and concertmaster of the Tulsa Symphony. Rossitza is joined by Emmanuel Manny Lopez, a cellist, member of the Harrington String Quartet, and Perryman Distinguished Artist at West Texas A&M University. We are also pleased to be joined by Professor Lino Rivera of St. Mary's College of California. Fantastic. Welcome, Rossitza.
Hi, Simeon. Hello, Lino, and hi, Manny. Simeon, thank you so much for having me on the show.
My pleasure. So, Rossitza, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to become a violinist.
Well, it was a choice since I come from a family of non-musicians. There was no pressure to play an instrument or to excel in music, but there was a pressure to excel in just about everything I was doing. So school, science, literature, language, all of these things were areas I was encouraged to work very hard at. But somehow music was the path that I chose. And now I find myself having three wonderful professions: as a concertmaster, as a member of a quartet, and also as a teacher.
Fantastic. Manny, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Manny, so can you tell us about yourself and why you decided to become a professional cellist?
Yes. Well, I'm originally from Santiago, Chile. And unlike Rossi, I had no choice in the matter because music chose me in a sense. I come from a family of musicians, kind of a long tradition. My grandmother went to Juilliard in the early 60s, and my parents are both musicians. They're still alive. My father is a violinist, and my mother is a cellist. My two sisters are violinists and violists, and my brother is a violinist. So there was really, in a sense, a predestined factor here, because I was told that I was going to become a musician, and fine. The cello seemed to be the instrument that fit me, and because one of the principal cellists of the city in which I grew up, in Santiago, of the orchestra there, the symphony orchestra, looked at me and looked at my hands and said to my mother, "Why don't you bring him over to the preschool program at the Catholic University in Santiago?" And the rest is history.
Fantastic. So, Rossitza, I want to ask you, so you're considered by all of your colleagues to be an outstanding violinist, but more than that, as you were talking about, by your three different careers, I could say, you're considered to be an outstanding violinist in a leadership role. Tell us a little bit about how you got into those leadership roles, and if you were, how you trained yourself to be good at those, or not.
Well, I think it goes with the personality, because I like to be in charge of things. But with these professions, it's just that I took the auditions, I got the auditions, and I ended up having to fill those positions. And being in a leadership situation for me means being a good facilitator, because it's so important to bring the best out of the people with whom you're working with. And with my Bulgarian upbringing, delivering criticism was something that nobody really taught me how to do, because Bulgarians tend to be very blunt and direct. So being in a leadership position, for me, the sharpest learning curve that I had to put myself through was learning how to criticize without hurting people's feelings, and be able to bring the best out of them. Yes.
Okay, and Manny, to you, so Rossitza is a violinist. I understand that violinists are have a lot of criticism directed at them pretty much all the time. Everybody knows they can hear what they're doing. They have the melody. They've got the highest part. Anything they do is out in the open. They're always right next to the audience. They're all of their people, the other violinists, are at their throats all the time. So what does it mean to you also when you think about Rossitza and her leadership role, and also as the cellist of the group, as the Distinguished Perryman Fellow, or excuse me, the performer there at the West Texas A&M University? What does this mean? What is this leadership? What does that all mean to you as a musician?
Well, in the case of Rossi, for instance, or a first violin performer, she is absolutely right that the spotlight, generally speaking, in the traditional repertoire of these works written for string quartets, the first violin is always on the spotlight. They, in fact, in the olden days, they used to be called the leaders of the quartets, of whichever quartet it was. So in terms of the music itself, the role of the first violin is deeply defined and very, in a sense, forcefully defined, because, as you said, they do carry the tunes, they do carry the ensemble, in a sense, physically speaking. We're always looking to her for what we call cues, in other words, how to be together in the quartet. Although I would say that recently, maybe, I don't know, in the modern times, if we can call them that, the role of the string quartet has evolved in that we all take a leadership position in terms of how the ensemble works. Regardless of the repertoire that we're doing, the four of us contribute to this leadership role. And so that also kind of liberates a little bit of pressure of the first violin in our case, because she is so out there. We don't want her to feel isolated. We very much want to support her role as she supports our role throughout the group. So in a sense, the leadership can be both obviously a leading kind of a situation, but also a supportive situation, particularly when it comes to chamber music.
Okay, and we hear that very often in business management theory circles. We talk about this flat hierarchy, or everybody's doing they're all on equal footing or whatever. So that sounds very, very relevant. Okay, so I want us to take a look now at another video. This is the quartet playing a quartet by Erwin Schulhoff. Fantastic. So this brings us to our first roundtable. What is a string quartet, and how is the Harrington String Quartet the same or different? Rossitza, let's start with you. Tell us about this fascinating musical genre.
The Harrington String Quartet has been in existence for over 40 years, and it was created by a very generous gift by Sybil Harrington, a great benefactress from West Texas. She loved music, the arts, and she donated lots of money, not just to the university for the creation of the Harrington String Quartet, to the symphony, but also to the Metropolitan Opera. And actually the lobby at the Met is named after her. What is different about this quartet is that it exists as an institution instead of the way usually quartets are formed, when four people get together and they play music and they develop repertoire, start playing concerts and so on. Here, the quartet has already been in place for quite some time, and the members of it, in a way they come and go, although we have been a very stable formation for now. Manny, Vesco, and I have been playing for over 11 years together, and our newest member joined us 6 years ago. So there's a certain consistency, although if one of us decides to leave, the institution goes on and it will be replenished by somebody else, because there's there's endowment, there's concert series, there's the infrastructure that is in place for the quartet. Manny, would you like to add more to this?
Yes, so Simeon asked, what is a string quartet at the very beginning, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously 4 people that, regardless of the circumstances, are brought together to perform and to learn music that is written for the string quartet repertoire, which is one of the vastest, most comprehensive repertoires in existence. And of course, the meaning of it is essentially a chamber music group. There are piano trios, there are duos, there are string trios, there are quintets and sextets, octets, and so forth and so on. But the string quartet has a particularly profound tradition, because as I've said in the past, composers such as Haydn, who is considered to be the father of the string quartet, because of the sheer number of works for the genre that he composed. Composers always pour their innermost thoughts into this particular medium. They develop their identities in the string quartet medium. They worked their individual, if you will, idiosyncrasies as composers in this particular conversational group. After all, chamber music is a conversation amongst 4 musicians in this particular case. So as a compositional style and device and whatnot, it brings some of the most intimate thoughts, some of the most important developments in music, and historically speaking also. So it's a very deep connection between 4 human beings in this particular case. But in general, chamber music can be defined as that as well.
Fantastic. So I'd like to bring in now Professor Lino Rivera of St. Mary's College of California. He has a question or comment. Hi, Lino.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Rossitza and Manny. It's a pleasure to see you and meet you here. When I was a student at the University of Maryland, our resident quartet was the Guarneri String Quartet, which all of us know who they were. And they would have open rehearsals for us, besides coaching us on chamber music. And I tell you, there were just many of those rehearsals, I thought they were going to have a fight on stage, because they would not agree on what to do. Oh, no, I have the important line. Oh, no, I have the important line. And it's just an argument, a real, very tense argument on stage in front of the audience. So I'm wondering, how do you rehearse? What do you do? Who decides what to do when there is a disagreement as in terms of the interpretation of the pieces you are rehearsing?
Rossitza, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So I'll give my version. In general, we are very well behaved during rehearsals, but we have our times when we throw fits, and they're not very often. These things don't happen very often. Since all of us are of the mind that we have to bring forth what the composer wrote. So the composer is the boss, and we have to put aside our egos and everything. Often things go through a discussion, and we have to agree musically on what happens. We also record ourselves, and the recording is the most honest critic about that, because once we hear it, we all know who has the right idea about things. And we just follow that. Now, I also want to add that since I play with also with various chamber music formations with the Tulsa Symphony, sometimes we repeat repertoire that I have worked on with the quartet. And it's just so curious how absolutely everything about the piece changes when you play it with different people. Even though the preparation, the concept that I formed has been based on the studies I've done on my own, once you add the other voices, you have to be completely flexible and accommodating, and sometimes you agree, sometimes you disagree, but you have to accommodate what happens. So that's my perspective on it, Manny.
Well, yes, exactly. I mean, you know, the Guarneri Quartet was a very high-profile group in its day. It was an extremely famous group. They traveled all over the world, and in a sense, they were under a great deal of pressure to maintain a very high level of performance. And with a great deal of pressure on you, you know, as human beings, we react. We don't always analyze our feelings deeply before we say something. We simply react. We are humans, and they, being wonderful musicians that they were, they also had very strong personalities. And so those, what you saw in that rehearsal, I think was a very candid, must have been a very candid moment, but it really does reflect the fact that there are four human beings trying to create a very high level performance. And that in itself is a very difficult situation to be in. Of course, they were wonderful, and audiences throughout the world enjoy their performances, you know, thoroughly. But there's always a price to pay. In our case, we are, you know, the four of us have very strong personalities as well. And, you know, we're very lucky to be playing together. I've always considered that to be I've been in the quartet since 1991, so it's been 31 years, and I've seen many different permutations of this group. And I have to say that this final group that we have now, or I mean, so far, it's a wonderful group, and it's a wonderful collaborative group. Of course, we've had disagreements. As I said, we're all human, we all react, we all have bad days, we all have good days, and so forth and so on. But the one thing that I've always felt that we're able to always maintain is respect for each other. In any relationship, the very first word that should pervade the treatment of each other is really respect. We're there for a reason. We did actually choose each other to play together, in spite of the fact that other people left and whatever. We still had to choose a person that would reflect high level of professionalism, music making, and also collaborative, you know, colleague behavior. And I'm happy to say that in spite of the ups and downs, it's been a wonderful collaboration, and I hope it goes on forever.
Manny, if I may jump in before we move on to our next video, though, I want to ask, when you talk about respect, tell us, what does that mean concretely if, say, Rossitza tells you, you know, Manny, I think, you know, what you just did was, you know, that's an awful idea, or you made a big mistake. I mean, how do you, you know, what does respect mean in that case? How does it, how do you put that into action?
Well, you know, she has never said that to me. And I have never said anything like that to her either. But when she does say something, it must be because she truly feels, when it's something that can borderline criticism of a kind, it must be that there's something from her perspective that is not working. So I, as a fellow musician and her colleague, I have to try my darndest to try to put myself in her shoes. She's there for a reason. She's there because she's a wonderful violinist and a wonderful colleague. So, as I said, we have never really said that to each other in that sense, as you mentioned. But whenever there is a point, and whenever I say something to her, I have to be very careful. I have to be very careful in the way I put things, because we're human beings. We have sensibilities, and we have, you know, a sense of self-worth that can be at any point in time can be threatened. But in our case, what we have to develop, and what I've learned my entire professional life here, is that you have to develop a language that addresses only what is musically pertinent and not personal in that sense. In order to create a product that everyone will like, we have to be able to be polite, we have to be differential, and that, to me, that's the meaning of the word respect, because we chose each other.
Okay, so let's have another look then at this is the Dochnani String Quartet. Let's have a listen. Fantastic. Well, we clearly see in that case 4 individuals who are respecting each other, and it's because of their individuality that it's so exciting, that it's so great, these 4 people coming together. Wonderful. So our next roundtable is, what is the School of Music at the Sybil B. Harrington College of Fine Arts and Humanities at West Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University, and what roles do the Harrington String Quartet play there as performers and academic faculty? Maybe Rossitza, let's start with you. Tell us about this fascinating, as you mentioned, that this fascinating quartet that's part of the university, that's an institution in itself, and what you're doing there in this place that most of us have probably never been, Canyon, Texas.
Well, it's a place worth visiting because of the canyon, the Palo Duro Canyon, that's just 10 miles from my house. The School of Music has over 350 students, so it has both undergraduate and graduate degree. The faculty is about 35 people, I think, full-time. So it's a fairly large program. We have very good student orchestra, and the band program is also extremely strong. The quartet has a unique presence because usually for a school of this size, on the string faculty, you would have maybe one person who teaches both violin and viola, a person who teaches both cello and double bass. And in our case, we have the quartet is full-time faculty. We also have a double bass professor here. Originally, the quartet was also part of the Amarillo Symphony. So the string principals were the members of the quartet. And then there was the element of playing in the quartet and the teaching professor positions at the university. Within the last 7 years, these duties were reduced only to the university. So we rehearse on campus, and often we have never closed our doors to students or whoever is interested to come and listen. So we've had open rehearsals. They're not a regular occurrence, but whoever wants to come and listen is welcome. Pre-COVID, we used to rehearse in Manny's studio, which is the largest of the rooms that the four of us have on campus. But because of COVID, we started rehearsing at the Chamber Concert Hall on campus. And this actually has changed our sound quite a lot. Manny, I'm sure you're aware of this, but we all have changed the way we play simply because we hear things very differently while we're in the hall. Since we spend so much time together in rehearsal, we also tend to work a lot with students from each other's studios. So, for example, my studio classes happen with the viola studio classes, and my students benefit a lot from what our viola professor has to say. I'm there for the viola students as well. When it comes to chamber music, it's structured in such a way that all four of us are listed on the faculty, and we can all work with the groups, and we certainly have our seminars together. Yeah, Manny, would you like to add something to this? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
Yes.
As a quartet, we've always been very deeply involved in this community. We have serviced, in terms of students, for instance, we do regular visitations to the schools in our area to perform for them, and to reinforce the name of West Texas A&M University to their choices for school when they eventually graduate. And of course, in the region as well, we've traveled widely in the state of Texas to bring the quartet's name through concerts and outreach performances and so forth to the region, because we are a little bit isolated. We're in the panhandle of Texas. I live in Amarillo, which is just about 15 minutes away from Rossi's town of Canyon. And where the university is located, but it's essentially part of a whole. So it's very isolated in a way, in a sense. So our Amarillo is about just under 200,000 people that live here in the metropolitan area. So we have to try to, what we do is to try to avoid the concept of being a well-kept secret in this area. So our role as ambassadors of the university is multifaceted and varied, and we are blessed that the university has been so supportive of our mission, because it was a gift to the university to begin with. So at the same time, they're also very fortunate to have a group like ours, as Rossi mentioned. And so our role, as you can probably imagine, is quite varied and multifaceted, as I mentioned. And we're very grateful for it.
And Manny, if I can ask, so maybe you'll tell us also a little bit about the students that you teach directly cello, you teach music too, and then also there are these interdisciplinary projects that you're part of. I understand you're part of the engineering school and the chemistry school and all this. There are really a lot of different things that are going on there.
Yes, yes. Our students, of course, we have different. We teach students who have opted for different majors. For instance, we have music performance, music education, music technology, music therapy at the university. As well as music business. The students that come to us, they do have to choose an instrument because that's part of the curriculum. And of course, we are, each one of us recruits students that are obviously going to be part of the music program. But I've got music performance students and music education. I think that probably at the university, the biggest program is music education. Our students who graduate with that degree, enjoy 100% placement in the workforce throughout this area. And that is a very high return for what we do. Obviously, music performance is a smaller number because it's a very different degree, but it's also, a degree that we are able to tell the students that no matter what degree you have, you're always going to be treated the same. We were all trained, my colleagues and I were trained in music schools and conservatories in this country and abroad, and we were trained as performers. So all of our students get the same treatment. And I think I'm going to let Rossi talk about the interdisciplinary, because that's something that we're doing this year as a special project in our season concerts here at the university.
Yes, in order to draw a wider audience and just make connections between music and other disciplines, we decided to start this interdisciplinary project with other departments on campus. And the one that we have so far done was with the School of Engineering, and we partnered with the math department. The topic of this collaboration was musical ciphers. So the music portion of this included pieces that contain musical anagrams, if you wish. So we played pieces by Bach, Shostakovich, and Brahms that contain those musical ciphers. So in the Bach Contrapunctus 14, it was the B-A-C-H motif which he uses. For the Shostakovich piece, we chose quartet number 6, which has the D-S-C-H motto in it, and it's not in a horizontal version as you're used to hearing that, but actually it occurs at all of the cadential final moments of the movements, and it's all grouped together vertically. So it's quite a stunning sonority. And then we invited a couple of artist colleagues, friends, to play the Brahms Sextet number 2, which has the Agata motif. And then the mathematicians branched into explaining how ciphers work, what the origin of the ciphers was, and they also went into some of the modern era calamities we have experienced, like when the Snowden data came out, and how that redefined the way things are encrypted, and explained how the cryptograms and just much more sophisticated encryption today works in order to make all transactions safe for everybody. Future collaborations, the one that is coming up is with the chemistry department, and we're looking forward to that because it has an element of libation in it. Apparently, there are studies that indicate that sound waves affect the process of fermentation. And the professor we approached to collaborate with us on this is also a master brewer. And he's going to brew a batch of beer under the constant loop of recording from the program for the concert we're performing. And then there will be a control batch, and there will be a beer tasting celebration where we determine whether they indeed taste all that different. Now, for the students, because the majority of them will be under 21, instead of the beer, he's also going to have cakes baked under the same idea. So obviously, it just opens the door to discussing the propagation of sound waves, because there's so many properties that could come into that equation. So it's just a very nifty way of including the world of physics and the things that are unchangeable, and they have their own rules with the world of music, where, as Manny mentioned so many times, there's the human element, and so it's just a wonderful fusion of those two things.
Okay.
And then the third project we have is a very serious one, because it deals with interpreting documents, and we will have a constitutional scholar join us to discuss how interpreting musical documents from centuries ago is similar to interpreting Word documents from that time. And yes.
Fantastic. And tell us, and which Word documents are you planning on interpreting?
Well, he will talk about the Constitution. This is still a project that is being developed, but for example, imagine hearing Eine kleine Nachtmusik with the wrong notes. Change just one note of the opening, and that's a different piece. And actually, for all of us who know how it goes, that would be pretty offensive. Or maybe humorous, depending on how the notes are changed. But we all will know that there's something not quite right about it. So with Word documents, you change one word or you misinterpret one thing, then the meaning could be very, very different. So
fantastic. So Professor Lino Rivera, Lino, you've got another question, comment?
Yes, I do. And actually, this is very, very fascinating. First of all, please let me know when that beer tasting event is, and I'm going to fly over there.
Okay, February 17th, please come. We would love to have you.
I want to know the difference between the different kinds of beers. Anyway, I guess my question is, you were talking about recruiting, and this is for Manny as well, Rossitza and Manny. How do you recruit students? I mean, really tangible, exact things that you do. It's just like, do you just go to schools and play a concert? What do you do to recruit students to your school?
Well, we all recruit students slightly differently. We've had different initiatives. We've used different initiatives in the past, which have had very wonderful returns. We generally do for instance, during the summertime, we do a week's worth of chamber music, what we call the chamber music camp. And it's taken different forms and shapes from time to time, from year to year. But for a long time, we did this every summer for about a week, where we would invite students from all over the region. And they would, the faculty would not just be the four of us, but also it would involve teachers from the area to come and help with the school age children, to bring them over and learn chamber music repertoire, which we always made an emphasis of that, because chamber music is really the best way to become a musician, developing skills to learn how to listen to each other and work together as individuals. So we did that. We've been doing that for several years. As we mentioned earlier, we visited schools, but we also do it differently individually. Some of our colleagues, Rossitza has gone abroad. She has brought students from abroad, Brazil. I think she made a recent trip there to essentially spread the name of our quartet and the university. Our second violinist, Yevgeny Svonnikov, has also gone abroad to Mexico. He's brought students from Russia, from
Colombia.
Colombia, exactly.
Yes.
Brazil as well.
Yes.
But that is done. He and Rossi would go on individual trips to do that kind of recruiting. But as a quartet, we visit schools, as we mentioned earlier, and we've taught chamber music together. We've coached together to students of younger ages. So it's multifaceted, the way in which we recruit. Do you want to add something else, Rosie?
Yes, I also teach quite a few pre-college age students because since the area is so isolated, it is difficult to attract students to come here, and unless the local level is very high, it's difficult to make the case for come and study music with us. So I have started doing this just within the last 3 years, and it's already paying off big because the level of the young students who are playing is extremely high. They could apply to conservatories. Probably they will be welcomed in top schools in the United States to study. And it's also very gratifying and very inspiring to the older students, because I have my studio class together with the private students and the university students, and the university students always often would feel intimidated at how quickly the young ones are developing, and the amount of repertoire they go through. So that has been also a very, very good recruitment tool.
Okay, fantastic. So let's listen now to Rosie performing the Mendelssohn. This is the Mendelssohn Concerto for violin. Here it is. Fantastic, wonderful. So I would like to talk about now the Tulsa Symphony Orchestra. Rosie, tell us about being concertmaster. I believe that was a recording of the Tulsa Symphony Orchestra that you were performing as soloist with. So tell us a little bit about this orchestra and how it operates differently.
Yes, that was the Tulsa Symphony Orchestra with Stephen Smith on the podium. So the Tulsa Symphony is a very unique organization because it's a musician integrated orchestra. This means that the musicians are involved in all of the levels of operation of it. They're executive musicians, in other words, musicians who play in the orchestra, but they also run the office. And then the day-to-day, the artistic operations are also left to the musicians. So there's a lot of committee work because it's the musicians who decide the programming. We don't have a music director, so we also choose who the conductors would be for each program we design. And it's just a very idealistic organization because it's the music that guides what we do. I need some questions about this in order to be able to give you more information about it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I'd want to bring in Manny and ask Manny, tell us about then when you think about a concertmaster, what is this role? And then when you're talking about an orchestra that doesn't have a fixed music director, what is it? What does that mean to you? What is Rossitza? What are the challenges that she's facing?
Yes, well, it's a very, as she said, it's a very unusual thing. But that really means that the orchestra, you know, the one word that comes to mind to me in the way the orchestra would behave under these circumstances is flexibility. Because if you have several guest conductors, every conductor brings in a different sound, brings in a different character, if you will. So the orchestra members have to be extremely flexible to adjusting to the different, idiosyncrasies that every conductor would demonstrate in this case. That I think that in a sense, it doubles the challenges for Rosie to be a concertmaster because she is the leader of the musicians there, for the lack of a better word. She is the one that the orchestra's identity might use her as a conduit, as a concertmaster. So I've always believed that her experience as a chamber musician, and especially with us in the quartet, has reinforced these leadership qualities that she brings to the symphony because of the fact that they have different conductors as guests on a regular basis. And that is something that can only enhance our own experience as chamber musicians in the quartet, because she brings in more experiences, more differences, more, if you will, learning opportunities from performing with the Tulsa Symphony, which is a very fine orchestra. And you could hear in her tone in the concerto that she just played, we just heard, that all of this comes into play because she's also a soloist. So that is a remarkable position to be in, and I must say also very difficult at times, I'm sure of it. I'm speculating, but she makes everything sound so easy at any rate. So
fantastic. So final thoughts, Manny, let's start with you, to your students, to all of the people you're at the university who are not necessarily musicians, that you are forming to take on different roles, probably also leadership roles. What do you wish those people, what do you wish other people who are outside of music, what do you wish them as they develop their leadership skills and then become hopefully acquainted with the string quartet and especially the Harrington String Quartet?
Well, I've always said that music is a language of hope and the language of brotherhood. And music, of course, is something that is inherently human. And I think that we can all learn from each other in a very valuable way, because communication, music is also, as I said, a language. So it's intrinsically a communication skill and a communication venue to express ourselves. So I think that the more music we have in our lives, I think the happier we will be, if we can even use that word.
Okay, fantastic. Rossitza, final thoughts?
Well, I think that the human spirit is capable of producing the best and the worst. But I like to focus on the best, and I want to echo what Manny just said about hope. We live in troubled times, but we know that scientists have discovered an alternative fusion now. So maybe our energy problems will be solved, and if everybody does their job the way scientists are doing it, and the way we musicians, music workers are trying to do what we do, we will live in a better place, on a better planet, and with much more enjoyment and peace and love.
Okay, thank you so very much to Dr. Rossitza Jekova-Goza, and thank you to Emmanuel Manny Lopez.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simeon.
So
Thank
let's
you.
take a look at what's coming up next week. We have William Deresiewicz, The End of Solitude. Are we still afraid of the dark? Yes, writes William Deresiewicz in his sharp critique of a contemporary West that is spoiled by overabundant material wealth. But our biggest fear is called solitude. Describe that noun as you will, the state of being alone by one's self or not in the physical or virtual presence of others. Solitude has come to mean everything that a successful modern life should avoid. Inexpensive Wi-Fi and its companions, smartphones and social media apps, have molded our perception of being to the point that if we are not connected to everyone else at any given moment, something is wrong. Just how wrong depends on how many steps we are up the social ladder. But who cares if we are so afraid of solitude? Aren't governments and corporations working day and night to assure the resilience of hyper-connected social media networks so that no one ever has to experience solitude again? We should all care, argues Deresiewicz, because solitude is the only path to becoming a fully formed human being, one able to think and act for her or himself. Come welcome William Deresiewicz to our show, and let's ask him about the exorbitant value humans have attributed to solitude over the ages. Also, I'm delighted to announce that for that show next Wednesday, the education historian Jonathan Zimmerman will also join the conversation. As always, all information about upcoming shows may be found at www.simeonmoro.com. Once again, thank you so very much to Dr. Rossitza Goza and to Emmanuel Manny Lopez. Thank you to Professor Lino Rivera. Thank you to Agnieszka and Benoit Rivolet for their support of this show. Most of all, thanks to you, our participants who make it all worthwhile. From New London, New Hampshire, Canyon, Texas, and the Bay Area, California, goodbye, and see you next Wednesday.
Right.